And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Joe Concha. Coming up tonight, ISIS remains in the news after they've taken at least 150 Syrian Christians hostage. CPAC begins in Washington. Our own Rick Unger, who's there primarily for the minibar and most likely Pigs in a Blanket abs, will be giving us an update on the political stuff as well. And the federal government is getting ready to regulate the internet. And we'll be talking about that and much, much more with NBC sports guy Dave Briggs is back. David, welcome to the show. The tables have turned.
Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you. He has tremendous hair, doesn't he? And somebody with even better hair, the Reverend Jenny Crumpton, joins us. Welcome back.
Hi, good to be here.
Nice color on you. I
Thanks.
like that, yes. And finally, Rabbi Brad Hirschfeld. He's the editor of the Wisdom Daily. He joins us as well.
I do. It's good to be here.
That's a joke if I've ever heard one, huh? A jock, a reverend, and a rabbi walking into a studio. Without further ado, it's time for your daily download. Well, the Justice Department today announced that 3 New York residents have plotted to travel to Syria to join ISIS. The men range from 19 to 30 years old. 2 were citizens of Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, and 1 man was accused of plotting to kill the president. Meanwhile, yesterday we told you that ISIS abducted 90 Syrian Christians. It turns out they've taken even more hostages than that. Ask Syrian Human Rights Network reports that the actual number is about 150. And no surprise here, ISIS is threatening to kill them all. To get an update on these 2 developing stories, we are joined by former CIA analyst Lisa Ruth, who joins us from Newsmax Studios in South Florida. Lisa, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Good to be here.
And let's start with the breaking news out of New York City. What can you tell me about the 3 men who were arrested today for planning to join ISIS?
Well, you know, essentially what it looks like is this is the same situation we've seen over and over, the same situation we saw in Minnesota, in fact. They are people who've been living here but were recruited online probably and wanted to go join ISIS. The jihadist message continues to resonate. And really, I think this is a good example of just how far it's come. It's here, and you have to really be vigilant. We've also got these girls who were traveled over there. So it is another example of ISIS's ability to spread its message on social media and recruit.
Well, you're right about that. I think back in 2001, 2002, we didn't hear much about people, particularly Westerners, particularly those from the United States, joining Al-Qaeda. But now, thanks to Twitter and thanks to really, I don't want to say impressive when it comes to anything when it comes to ISIS, but it's the only word you could use. And impressive, a very impressive communications and propaganda machine that certainly seems to be recruiting Westerners by the dozens. It seems like we're hearing of another group, and particularly women as well, going over there every day. Let me ask you this. Do you believe we're going to see more types of situations like this? I think so, yes.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you completely. I think it's bizarre for most Americans because you sit there and say, if you saw those beheading videos, that certainly didn't make you want to run and join the group. If anything, it would turn you against them. But this message for people who are subject to be brought into it, this resonates. And as you said, we've got 3 young girls. There was a case a couple months ago of a girl in Virginia, a woman who was trying to get other young girls to join. And these are jihadi brides. I think we're going to see more and more of it. I think it's going to be increasingly slick. You know, as you said, it's pretty impressive, and I hate to say that as well. But it's like they've got their own PR firm out there. They're building their brand, they're improving on it, and the brand is getting stronger and stronger.
It's a sick brand, that's for sure. Why don't you give me an estimate, and I know that's a very hard number to put on, but how many people in the United States you think are sympathetic to ISIS? Is it a couple of hundred? Is it even a couple of thousand? Tough number to throw out, I know.
Unfortunately, I think you've just hit the nail right on the head. This is a big problem. We don't know. You know, my colleagues and I are going back and forth all the time with, did you see this on social media? Did you see this? Trying to get a sense of how many people this is resonating with. We really have no idea. And it could be 100, but it's probably not, because if you just look at the numbers who've gone over. I heard a number the other day, 10,000. I think that's probably high. On the other hand, I just don't know. And it's very frustrating from an intelligence standpoint because, again, how can you counter something when you really don't even know how effective it is or who it's reaching?
Lisa, final question. I only have about 30 seconds. Last night, Fred Flight said that this looks like the beginning of a genocide when it comes to Christians in Syria and Iraq. Would you agree with that characterization?
I wish I could say no, but I absolutely agree, and I think that this is really a very, very bad sign. Genocide, absolutely, and unfortunately.
Well, hate to end on that note, Lisa, but we appreciate you joining us, and enjoy the warm weather. I think it's about 84 degrees warmer where you are than where we are right now, so at least let's end this on a happy note.
It is.
For you, anyway. Thank you.
Thanks.
Rabbi, you've worked with Islamic extremists before.
I have.
Where's this all going?
Well, I think we have to be very clear. A lot of people are talking about, can we win? I want to be very clear. Not only can we have to win. This is not something where anyone can lose, and it's going to involve three things, I think: fighting, talking, and a better understanding of the end game. We are going to have to kill a lot of bad guys, and anyone who's squeamish about that doesn't understand what we're up against. But we're also going to have to engage a lot of people we don't like to talk to, a lot of people who are crazy, and it's going to also require naming that what we're dealing with is a faith-driven enemy. I'm not accusing an entire faith, but hiding from the role of religion in this will actually get more people killed. We're going to have to do both, and one of the challenges we have right now is the fighters don't like to talk, and the talkers aren't willing to fight, and that's really dangerous, and that's on us.
When you say we have to talk to some people that we don't like to talk to, I assume you're saying Iran.
I don't know if it's necessarily Iran, and I think, again, I just want all options on the table all the time. People I don't like to talk to, I often have to engage, but I want to do it from a position of strength. And that's the last piece. We do have to understand the end game. If this is becoming genocide, and it may be, we're going to have to put a stop to that. No ifs, ands, or buts, full stop. On the other hand, I think the idea this is going to be some massive nation building and we're going to turn parts of the Middle East beyond the state of Israel, which looks a lot like the United States, into other United States is incredibly naive. We may actually have to break up nations, as we did in the former Yugoslavia, when there were historic hatreds, and we said, look, if you people can't live together and will only murder each other, then we will have to separate you by force of arms. Not to build new nations, because that doesn't always work, but to prevent the genocides that may be coming.
Well, we've certainly been there on the nation building front, no question. I'd love to get your thoughts on this, guys, and maybe we'll talk about it a little bit in the next block, but unfortunately we have some bills to pay, so that would be that. Rabbi, thank you for those thoughts. I appreciate it. And coming up next, our own Rick Unger joins us from CPAC. That's in Washington. Unger at CPAC. Isn't that a conservative kind of gathering? Interesting. This is the Daily Wrap from New York City, only on Newsmax TV. Welcome back to Daily Wrap, everybody. I am Joe Concha, joined by Dave Briggs, the Reverend Jenny Crumpton, and Rabbi Brad Hirschfeld. I did promise I wanted to get your thoughts on what we were talking about last block. Certainly it was something that was very important, Jenny, in terms of this could be genocide. This could be the next Third Reich. I know that you sometimes have a more sympathetic view of the world. Your thoughts on ISIS, where this is going, and what we have to do to defeat them?
Well, I'm certainly not sympathetic with ISIS.
I don't mean that.
But, right.
In terms of diplomacy.
I actually really, I agree with the good rabbi here. We do a lot of interfaith dialogue, so I agree with your perspective. But I think the former NATO Commander General Wesley Clark made a really good point today that these types of propaganda attempts are very deliberate by ISIS, like going into a very rural, tiny, northeast Syrian town that was not guarded well. The people were very vulnerable. This is where the 150 Christians came from, mostly women, children, and the elderly. These are often signs that they're struggling a little bit because these are propaganda attempts to get more recruits by doing such things. So
you think like when they light the Jordanian pilot on fire, or they do the beheadings, that's just they're trying to show that
very specific message. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Because as we know, they set the Jordanian pilot on fire, which in the Muslim world is just a terrible travesty. You don't burn bodies.
So they're trying to one-up themselves in terms of shock value because they know that the media will cover those
absolutely, and we do it for them.
Dave, we've heard a lot about. In the beginning of this, a lot of people were against ground troops because we're weary of war, and we were in Afghanistan for all those years, and we still are to a certain extent in Iraq as well. Now you see poll after poll saying we need ground troops, and that's the only way that we're ever going to defeat this enemy, that airstrikes are not enough.
Well, I totally agree with that. You are going to need troops at some point, but I think the bottom line is this can't be the United States leading all efforts on this. This war has to be a broad-based coalition, and it's got to start in that region. It's got to be that region rising up and saying, we are standing up against this. This is not the United States war. This is all of our war. Because if it looks like ours, this will just be like Afghanistan and Iraq all over again. It needs to be the entire region joining forces with us.
And we're seeing that with the Jordanians doing airstrikes, because obviously their pilot, what happened to him, we just mentioned, and the Egyptians as well, because of the 21 Christians there as well. So yeah, I think Middle East boots on the ground. And by the way, the French were attacked recently, and obviously the Italians, Rome is always a target. You're right. This needs to be, I hate to call it a world war, but that kind of coalition.
Well, it's got to be a global coalition. The most important moments to this point, you're both right, were the mobilization of Jordanian forces and Egyptian forces. And in fact, when they asked the Sheikh, the Khalif of ISIS, about attacking Christians and when are you going to get to Israel and Jews, he said, oh no, we'll get there. But first we have to purify our people. This is fundamentally a civil war. And that's what's really scary. You can't fight someone else's civil war for them. And that's where you're 100% correct. Until this is thrashed out among the 1.4 billion Muslims, we have to make sure there is no genocide. And Christians are particularly vulnerable. And we do have to watch out for that. But fundamentally, this will not be brought to a good end until within the community called Global Islam, this is worked out and this is crushed by Muslims because it's not who they want to be as a global people.
Right. And we have to keep in mind that a ground war is exactly what ISIS wants. That is what is going to set off their apocalypse that they believe that they're bringing into being to create the end of the world, where true Islam will be revealed as the truth. So we have to be very careful about sending in ground troops, when we do it, how many we send. And I think we're right to really be very deliberate about thinking through that and trying other methods before we play into their hands in such a way. They've really put us in a terrible position.
I just wonder if they need an excuse for declaring the apocalypse, right? And you can't kind of get a girl pregnant. I guess you kind of can't go to war.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's true.
I think maybe, we had an ABC on a couple of nights ago, Carl Higbee, who said, Dave, go big or go home.
Right. The way to deconstruct those apocalyptic dreams is win. It's amazing how victory makes people rethink their apocalyptic
But don't you think
visions.
it'll be a little tougher since they're a non-state actor? They're so slippery, they're all over, they're very virtual. I don't think this will be the type of ground war that we're used to.
No, it won't be. That's why I said talking and fighting. But the talkers who are worried about going into fight will also have to be ready to fight. And it's that combination that we're going to have to come together as a country to mobilize well in order to accomplish what we need to accomplish.
How do you battle back against the recruitment, though? I guess that's do you have to peel back the curtain here and expose to the world what they are doing? Hey, you want to go ahead. Here's what you're looking forward to. It's a virtual prison there.
Well, I think that's a big piece of it.
They will take your passport. They will never let you get out. And
it's
show them.
Yes, I think people need to see the horror they're going to, and we have to admit that for some people, that horror is their faith. And that's what we're going to have to deal with and really hold that up to the world and say, is that really who you want to be?
Well, and these are often young, very young, disenfranchised people. Even the ones in the United States are often from another culture and may feel a little dislocated and disenfranchised, and they play upon that. They clearly see the violence played over and over in our media on a daily basis. They have a good idea of what they're going to be a part of.
The women that are recruited, shouldn't we show them how women are treated by ISIS? I mean, let's not hide it. Let's
no,
I don't think anyone's hiding that.
The best disinfectant is bright light, but we also can't be naive. There are people who actually choose that life, and it's not only because they didn't get a job, and it's not only because of economic issues. People will act against economic self-interest to pursue the faith they deeply love. This is, at some level, about that kind of conflict, and we're going to have to admit that. There's no getting out of it, because it's beyond the rational.
Well, interestingly, the State Department has just begun a new group for social media to try to push back against the propaganda and start our own Western allies sort of social media campaign to really try to let young people know what is going on.
Actually, what I'd rather have them do is reach out to Muslims we generally are not comfortable with but are not quite ISIS and have them tell those kids, you don't have to go that far. You don't have to please America, but you don't have to go that far. It's not about making them, who we're trying to convert, into us. It's helping them be a less toxic version of who they want to be.
It seems almost like gangs here, right? That kids join gangs in inner cities because they just want to belong to something.
Right.
They don't feel like they have any sort of future, but hey, I go in here, I could be tough, right? I'm part of a group. I could say I accomplished something, as sick as even this is. Right, but I see kind of some parallels there between kids joining American gangs in Chicago and joining this. But I think once they get in, they realize, oh, wait a minute, this is
and
far,
then they
far
can't
worse.
get out.
Yeah, exactly. But the bottom line is that, again, you put Tinder in Syria and Iraq, and suddenly happiness comes. That's what I say. The Tinder.
They'll all be distracted.
Right.
Swipe right to save the world, huh? That was Joe's bumper.
This is a happy show. I'm trying to end on a happy note.
So.
Anyway, coming up next on the Daily Wrap, the Obama administration is ready to regulate your internet. That's next on the Daily Wrap.